The day I left the postpartum care center, Berlin came to pick me up, with my favorite cake and a divorce agreement. "Manda is coming back to the country," he said calmly. "The company has to stay with me. Everything else will belong to you and the child." I looked over the clauses, a cold sneer forming in my heart. This was nothing more than the scraps left behind after he had already transferred all the assets. "The company was built by both of us," I said, feigning hurt. "Are you really this heartless?" "The company was founded to fulfill Manda's dream." He handed me the pen without a trace of guilt. I signed swiftly, so swiftly that he froze. "For years together, and you don't feel even a bit of attachment?" Cradling my son, I smiled faintly. "I wish you and Amanda everlasting love." He would never know. The company he treasured so much, its core technology had long been in my hands. The one he cast aside was, in truth, his only lifeline. Chapter 01. Today is the day I leave the postpartum recovery center. The sunlight outside is dazzling, spilling into the room and landing softly on my baby's peaceful face. I carefully wrap him in his swaddle, my heart heavy with a feeling I can't quite name. This month felt like a stolen slice of time, sealed off from the world, just me and this tiny warm life. A soft knock on the door. Holding the baby, I rise. A faint, almost laughable flicker of hope crosses my heart. Maybe he still cares. The door opens. Berlin stands there, impeccably dressed in his tailored suit, hair neatly slicked back, his handsome face unreadable. In his hand is a neatly wrapped box from my favorite dessert shop, the one that makes the best cakes. My heart sinks ever so slightly. A gift without reason always hides one. All packed. The car's downstairs. His tone is steady, too steady, devoid of warmth or emotion. "Yes." I nod and step aside to let him in. For a few moments, silence fills the room, broken only by the baby's soft rhythmic breaths. He places the cake on the coffee table and in the same motion, I see him reach into the inner pocket of his jacket. A transparent file folder. Inside, a few crisp white sheets of paper. The paper is so white it almost hurts to look at. "Helen," he finally meets my eyes, his voice calm, so calm it's almost cruel. "Please sign this." He hands me the document. The bold black letters at the top of the first page read clearly, "Divorce Agreement." Time seems to stop for a few seconds. I stare at those words, my heart gripped, then abruptly released by an invisible cold hand. What's meant to come has finally come. Amanda is coming back. Which means I, her stand-in, must now exit the stage. I lift my gaze to Berlin. There isn't a single trace of guilt on his face. It's as if he's merely carrying out something that's both natural and long overdue. "Manda will return from overseas next week." He pauses, as though choosing his words carefully, but what comes out is sharp as a blade. "So, there's no need for us to continue." I take a deep breath, swallowing the lump rising in my throat, not for him, but for the new role I've only just begun to learn. Being a mother. I cannot lose control now. My eyes drift down to the agreement, scanning each clause line by line. When I reach the part that says all ownership and equity of the company shall belong to the husband Berlin, all other marital assets, including but not limited to real estate, deposits, vehicles, securities, etc., shall belong to the wife Helen and their child, my fingertips tremble slightly. Perfect. Just as I wanted. A cold, rational voice in my mind evaluates it calmly. This is, in his view, the most generous way to buy his freedom, to exchange everything except the company for a clean break, so he can welcome back his true beloved. But I can't let that show. I furrow my brows slightly, masking my calculation with the look of a woman deeply wounded. My voice trembles just enough to sound believable. "Berlin, this company is what we've built together, day and night, through all those years. Are you really in such a hurry? I just finished confinement, and you already can't wait to throw me out." Berlin looked at me, and for a fleeting moment, a trace of something complicated flickered in his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced once more by that cold detachment. Perhaps he thought I would cry, scream, or hurl accusations in hysterics. But what he didn't know was that my heart had already gone cold, had already died, long before this day. It died the moment he began ignoring me again and again for Amanda, when I went alone to pregnancy checkups that should have been shared between two people. You know, he finally said, avoiding my eyes, his tone dropping a little lower, the company was founded to fulfill the dream Manda couldn't achieve back then. So, it has to stay with me. Everything else, I can give to you and the child, as compensation. Compensation? I almost laughed out loud. He wanted to use the company I'd stayed up countless nights building, the one whose first client I had begged for with a bowed head, the one forged from my labor and our so-called partnership, to fulfill another woman's dream. How ironic. But I held it in. Endure the small losses for the greater victory. I looked at him, my expression laced with just the right amount of disappointment and resignation, then nodded gently, as if finally surrendering. Fine, I said softly. I'll sign. Berlin seemed surprised by how readily I agreed. He froze for a second, then pulled a silver pen from his inner pocket and handed it to me. I took it almost eagerly, perhaps even a little too fast, as though I feared he might change his mind. The metal was cool and heavy in my hand, and for some strange reason, that weight made me feel grounded. Flipping to the last page of the contract, I didn't hesitate. At the space marked Party B's signature, I wrote my name, Helen. The pen scratched lightly across the paper, making a soft shhhshhh sound, as if drawing the final line under 4 wasted years of my life. When I was done, I handed the agreement back to him. Berlin took it, checked the signature, then looked up at me. His brows furrowed slightly. My calm, no tears, no drama, no desperate questions, clearly puzzled him. For years of marriage, he finally asked, unable to stop himself, his gaze searching my face. Helen, do you really feel nothing at all? Feel something? Should I feel something for a man whose heart has always belonged to someone else? For the one who let me work late into the night at 8 months pregnant, while he flew overseas to celebrate Amanda's birthday? Bitterness rose inside me, sharp and icy. But outwardly, I only let a faint, almost serene smile touch my lips. I looked down at the baby sleeping soundly in my arms. The little one smacked his lips in a dream, blissfully unaware of the ugliness of the adult world. Then I lifted my head, met Berlin's eyes, and smiled, calm, distant, untouchable. I wish you and Miss Lynn, I said clearly, pausing between each word, a love that lasts forever. Berlin's pupils contracted slightly, as if my blessing had cut into him like a blade. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He could only stare at me, his expression suddenly unreadable. I didn't look back. I bent down, picked up my already packed bag, cradled my child, and walked straight toward the door, brushing past him without hesitation. The hallway light was dim. Each step I took away from that room felt like a step further from the last 4 years of my life. My back was straight. I never turned around. Berlin stood frozen, clutching the freshly signed divorce agreement in his hand, watching the woman walk away without a trace of regret. And for the first time, a faint, unsettling thought stirred in his chest. Had he just missed something? Or rather, had he just lost something far more precious than he ever realized? Chapter 2. Holding my baby and carrying my simple luggage, I walked out of the so-called top luxury postpartum care center in the entire city. Golden sunlight spilled over me, dazzling, but not warm. Berlin's car was parked right by the entrance, that same black sedan he once said represented the beginning of our shared career. He stood beside it, but unlike before, he didn't open the door for me. He simply watched as I placed my luggage into the trunk and got into the back seat with the baby in my arms. The whole ride was silent. The air inside the car felt heavy, frozen, as if even breathing would disturb it. Only the baby's occasional soft murmurs broke through the stillness. I turned my gaze toward the window, streets flying by, familiar stores, familiar corners, all seemed veiled in a dull gray haze. For years of marriage, and this 20-minute silent drive was all it came down to. The car stopped beneath the small apartment building I had bought before marriage. That apartment was a gift from my father when I first started dating Berlin. A girl should always have a place of her own, he'd said. Who would have thought those words would turn prophetic? We're here. Berlin's voice came from the front seat, flat, emotionless. Thank you, I replied just as calmly, stepping out with my baby and luggage. He said nothing more. He didn't even bother to get out and help me. The engine roared to life, and the black sedan merged into the traffic without hesitation, disappearing from sight. It felt as if a massive weight had been lifted, yet also as if I had stepped into an entirely new battlefield. Taking a deep breath, I tightened my arms around the tiny precious bundle in my embrace, my only treasure now, and turned toward the apartment building's entrance. The small apartment had been unoccupied for a long time. Even though I'd asked a cleaner to come before I arrived, it still carried a faint chill of emptiness. I carefully laid my baby down on the bed in the bedroom. He slept peacefully, completely unaware that his world had just been turned upside down. Looking at his little face, so strikingly similar to Berlin's, my heart ached sharply, like it was being pricked with 1,000 tiny needles. But the pain was quickly replaced by something stronger, resolve. For him, I had to be strong. After tidying up briefly, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Serafina's face, anxious, worried, and furious all at once. Warmth bloomed quietly in my chest. The moment I opened the door, she threw her arms around me. "Helen, are you okay? That bastard. How dare he actually go through with it?" Serafina was my college classmate, my best friend, and now a practicing lawyer. I had only mentioned the divorce to her once while at the care center, and yet here she was, storming in like a hurricane. "I'm fine." I patted her back gently, trying to sound casual. "See? I'm still standing." She released me, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. When her gaze landed on my slightly swollen ankles and pale face, her own eyes reddened. "Fine? How can you say you're fine? You just finished confinement and now this. Berlin is a complete scumbag, he'll get what's coming to him." Dragging me to the sofa, she rummaged angrily through her oversized handbag and pulled out a stack of papers. "Look at this." I had a friend dig into it, and it nearly made my blood boil. I took the documents from her. They were copies of bank statements and asset transfer records. It only took a few pages before my expression hardened. The evidence was unmistakable. During the late months of my pregnancy and confinement, Berlin had secretly transferred large sums from our joint account, spreading them across accounts under his mother's and a distant cousin's names. He had also changed the ownership of 2 properties we jointly purchased after marriage, without a word. "He planned this all along," Serafina spat, her jaw tight with rage. "He wanted to make sure you wouldn't get a single penny. If you hadn't insisted on keeping this premarital apartment, that Berlin family of his would have tossed you and the baby out with nothing." I stared at the black and white evidence in my hands, my heart sinking into icy water. So his so-called "everything else belongs to you" was only possible because he had already moved nearly everything of value out of reach. What he left me was nothing but scraps, and this old apartment he probably forgot still bore my name. What a clever scheme. "Helen, don't be sad," Serafina said quickly when she noticed my silence, trying to comfort me. "With this evidence, we can absolutely sue him for transferring marital assets. We'll make sure he walks away with nothing." I looked up at her, my expression calmer than she expected, no anger, no tears, no despair. "Serafina," I said softly, "I already suspected this." She blinked, stunned. You suspected it?" "Yes." I nodded, my gaze drifting toward the window. "For the past 6 months, he's been acting strange, distant, cold. He barely discussed company matters with me. Every time he came home, he guarded his phone like a state secret. I just didn't expect him to move this fast, or be this ruthless. He couldn't even wait until I finished confinement. So, what are you going to do?" Serafina grabbed my hand. "Say the word, I'll gather everything we need and drag him through court until he's ruined." Warmth flickered in my chest. Thank God I still had a real friend. But I shook my head. "Taking him to court might punish him," I said slowly, "but it'll take time and energy. And besides..." My tone sharpened, my eyes narrowing. "Getting back what's already mine, is that really revenge?" Serafina's eyes widened. "You mean, you've got a plan?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood, walked into the study, and opened the hidden compartment in my luggage. From it, I took out a small, unremarkable black metal USB drive. I placed it on the coffee table in front of her. "What's that?" she asked, frowning slightly. "Berlin thinks that by taking the company, he's finally fulfilled his precious white moonlight's dream." My lips curved into a faint, icy smile. "But he seems to have forgotten, or maybe never wanted to admit, that the core technologies of Vortex Tech, including the original patent data, the algorithm source code, and..." I paused, letting my words sink in. "The hidden financial records he had the accounting team forge during early-stage funding, all of that is right here." Serafina inhaled sharply, eyes wide in shock. When did you?" From the moment he started saying in front of me how tragic it was that Amanda never got to see the company's launch, from the moment he began subtly excluding me from core RD meetings, I said quietly but firmly, I started preparing my own way out. I wasn't naive, and I was no one's fool. After 4 years of building that company side by side, I knew Berlin better than anyone. And I knew exactly where Vortex Tech's lifeline was buried. What he took from me might look glamorous on the surface, but it was nothing more than an empty shell. The real soul, the part that could make or break him, was, and always had been, in my hands. Serafina's expression shifted from concern to awe, and finally, she slapped my shoulder with a grin. "Helen. You legend. I thought you'd lose it, but you were way ahead of them. You've set a perfect trap for those 2 cheating bastards." She grabbed the USB like it was a priceless weapon. "With this, Berlin's finished. He won't last a week." But I only shook my head slowly. "It's not enough," I said. "Not enough?" she echoed, confused. "This dirt alone could destroy him." "Destroying him isn't my goal." My gaze softened as I looked toward the bedroom where my baby slept peacefully. My voice grew tender, but resolute. "I don't just want revenge. I want to take back what's mine, and build something new. Something clean. Something that belongs entirely to me, Helen. I want Berlin to watch, as I rise higher than he ever imagined, without him, without Amanda's dream, without the lies. And I want his vortex to wither away, decaying in the shadow of my own wings." Serafina stared at me for a moment, then her eyes lit up again, brighter than before. "Yes. That's it. Build your own empire, make those 2 choke on it. Tell me what you need. I'll drop everything, forget the law firm. I'm your full-time legal counsel from now on." Her words made me laugh, and the heaviness in my chest began to lift little by little. "You're definitely getting your lawyer's fee," I said seriously, smiling faintly. "Now, we have 2 things to do. First, you'll help me recover whatever assets he transferred through the most legal, compliant means possible. Whatever we can get back belongs to me and the baby. It's rightfully ours." "No problem. Leave that to me." Serafina pounded her chest in promise, her tone fierce and full of loyalty. Second, my gaze shifted back to the small black USB drive on the table. My expression hardened, sharp as glass. "It's time to reach out to some old friends. Berlin probably forgot how small the tech circle really is. Back then, when we worked day and night to build Vortex Tech, those core engineers, did they admire his empty promises, or my ability to solve the impossible?" I picked up my phone and scrolled through a contact list I hadn't opened in ages. The glow from the screen illuminated my face. Serafina watched me, her voice soft but curious. "Helen, who's the first person you're going to call?" I found the name. My fingertip hovered above the call button, but I didn't press it right away. Outside, the evening light faded. The city's skyline flickered to life, one light after another. I raised my head and looked at Serafina. My voice was calm, steady, but resolute, carrying the weight of everything to come. "Hudson," I said. Chapter 3. Hudson's reply came faster than I'd expected. Not even 10 minutes after I'd sent a simple "How have you been lately" message, my phone began to ring. "President Sue." His voice burst through the receiver, full of excitement, almost stumbling over itself. "It's really you. I thought I was seeing things when I saw your message. How have you been? How's the baby?" That single "President Sue" made my nose sting sharply. On the very day Berlin couldn't wait to cast me aside, someone still remembered that I was the one who led the team through every major technical breakthrough. I was the real President Sue. I'm fine, Hudson. I steadied my emotions and spoke with quiet strength. The baby's fine too. It's a boy. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Hudson's joy was genuine, but then his tone wavered, hesitant and heavy. President Sue, things at the company, people are talking. About you and President Berlin. Did he? He didn't finish, but I knew what he meant. Yes, we separated. I admitted calmly, skipping over the personal details. Hudson, do you still remember the Project Venus optimization plan that got rejected? The one you kept working on privately. Project Venus, the so-called dream project Berlin always claimed was created to honor Amanda. There was a short silence on the line, and then Hudson's voice returned, trembling with surprise and excitement. President Sue. You still remember? Yes. I never gave up on it. I'm convinced it's the right direction. Compared to the version the company's developing now, performance could improve by at least 30%. But President Berlin, But Berlin never listened. He didn't care about building something solid and revolutionary. All he wanted was a flashy product he could release quickly, something he could use to impress Amanda. I remember, I said firmly, the past flashing before my eyes. 3 years ago, when Vortex Tech was still just a cramped office, there were only a handful of us, me, Berlin, Hudson, and a few other engineers working day and night to keep the dream alive. It was past 10 at night. The office lights were still on. Instant noodle cups and empty coffee cans littered the floor. And once again, Berlin was talking about Amanda. Amanda always said she dreamed of creating a smarter, more intuitive interaction platform. It's a shame her family situation. He leaned back in his chair, eyes distant, voice dripping with nostalgia and regret. I'd heard that speech too many times. At first, it hurt. Later, it just numbed me. Hudson and the others exchanged awkward glances, the air thick with discomfort. I cut in before Berlin could drift further into his sentimental haze, pushing a stack of handwritten notes, filled with algorithm sketches and structural designs, into the center of the table. Sorry to interrupt, I said hoarsely from exhaustion, but my eyes were bright. About our biggest technical bottleneck, I have a new idea. What if we bypass the existing universal framework and rebuild from the ground up? It'll mean a lot more work at the start, but once it succeeds, the system's stability and scalability will be revolutionary. Berlin frowned, flipping through my notes impatiently. Rebuild the core? That'll take forever. Amanda can't wait that long. We need something quick and shiny for the market. But President Berlin, Hudson interjected, his eyes gleaming with conviction, if President Sue's approach works, it'll be years ahead of the industry. What's the use of being ahead? Berlin waved his hand dismissively. The market won't wait. We're sticking to the original plan, get the demo out as soon as possible. And just like that, my proposal, the one that could have changed everything, was buried under his impatience and Amanda's ghostly shadow. At that moment, as I looked at Berlin, at the obsession burning in his eyes whenever he spoke of Amanda's dream, I finally saw him clearly for who he was. To him, the company's technical future, its true value, would never matter as much as using that company to worship Amanda's memory. President Sue. Are you still there? Hudson's voice snapped me back from my thoughts. I'm here. I steadied myself, my fingertip tracing absently across the phone screen. Hudson, if I told you I want to restart that optimization plan, the one they shot down, would you help me? The sound of his breathing quickened on the other end. Are you serious? You mean you're going to start your own company? His voice rose, trembling with excitement. Yes, I said decisively. I'm going to build something that truly belongs to us, not for anyone's dream, but our own passion for technology and our belief in what the market really needs. I paused for a second, then laid out the terms. You'll be in full charge of the technical department. Your salary will increase by 50% from what you earn now, and I'll give you 10% in technical equity. President Sue. Hudson's voice caught, thick with emotion. Count me in. I'm not doing this for money, I'm doing it because I can't stand it anymore. Berlin doesn't understand technology, doesn't respect it. The company's a mess now, only the sycophants get promoted. Those of us who actually code are being pushed aside. I've wanted to leave for months. His words rippled through me, like a stone dropped into calm water. So I was right, Berlin's empire was already rotting from the inside. Good. I said, my voice steady. Resign as soon as possible, and keep this confidential. Also, reach out privately to anyone on the old project team who's dissatisfied with the current situation. But make sure they're skilled and trustworthy. Got it, President Sue. Don't worry, I already know a few brothers who'd jump ship in a heartbeat. Hudson said, his energy surging. I'll start preparing right away. When the call ended, I sat in silence, heart still pounding. Hudson's reaction confirmed my instincts and fueled my resolve. Berlin, you've already lost the people who mattered. How do you plan to fight me now? Serafina appeared beside me, handing me a warm glass of water. Done talking? Judging from your face, it went well. I accepted the cup, the warmth seeping through to my palm. Yes. Hudson's in. He's even bringing several core engineers with him. I took a sip, feeling my throat relax. That's amazing. Serafina cheered, plopping down beside me. I knew it, once you step back into the game, no one can stop you. She looked at me with curiosity and admiration. Helen, watching you just now, it felt like I was seeing you from years ago again. The girl who used to shine in the lab, fearless and brilliant. I smiled faintly, saying nothing. Yes, once upon a time, I was the star student, top of my class, full of promise. But for Berlin's sake, I stepped out of the spotlight. I took on the dull administrative work, the client management, the financial juggling, just so he could chase his so-called dream. And what did that get me? My dedication and talent turned into a shadow he could erase at will, a tool to pave the way for someone else's glory. Serafina, I said suddenly, do you know where the core data processing model of Project Venus really came from? She blinked. Didn't Berlin come up with it? He always talks about how it was inspired by Amanda's concept. I let out a short, cold laugh, setting the cup down before crossing the room to a worn old box I'd brought along. Inside lay a thick sketchbook, its cover frayed from years of use. Flipping it open, I stopped at a page filled with intricate logical frameworks drawn in pencil, dense notes and mathematical formulas crowding the margins. The handwriting was raw yet strong, the handwriting of a much younger me. What's that? Serafina leaned over. She wasn't from a tech background, law school hadn't prepared her for technical schematics, but she recognized my handwriting instantly. This was the prototype for my senior thesis. I pointed at the diagrams, my voice calm but steady. When we started the company, I refined it and integrated it into our first project. It worked beautifully. Berlin saw its potential, took the idea, polished it up a bit, and turned it into what he called Amanda's dream. Serafina's eyes went wide with outrage. He did what? He stole your idea just to impress another woman? That's straight up theft. The difference, I said, closing the sketchbook, my gaze turning cold, is that in the eyes of the law, it's hard to prove who owns an idea. Then I smiled thinly. But what he forgot is this, a stolen idea is hollow. Without the person who can make it real, build it, grow it, it's worthless. Just like his company now, he thought he held the crown jewel, but the roots had already begun to rot. Night deepened outside. From the bedroom came a faint whimper, my baby stirring, probably hungry. I rose and began making formula with practiced ease. Holding him close as he fed, I felt something powerful awaken within me, a strength I had never known before. For him, I had to win. Berlin, you think you took the wings that would make dreams fly. But you never realized, you tore down the very foundation holding your empire upright. I gently patted the baby's back, gazing out into the night. The sky was almost black, with only a few lonely stars flickering faintly. Then my phone lit up. It was a message from Hudson. President Sue, I've reached out to 3 trusted brothers, they're all willing to come over. Also, there's something I'm not sure I should say. A faint unease rippled through me. I typed back, go ahead. The typing indicator blinked for a long while before his message finally appeared. Berlin seems to have noticed something. He came to the tech department this afternoon and took all the core source code and backup logs for Project Venus, saying it was for a security audit. My pupils contracted sharply. What? Why now? Why suddenly decide to review the base code? Coincidence? Or, had something leaked? A cold chill crawled slowly up my spine. Chapter 04. The news that Berlin had transferred the base-level code hit me like an icy needle, puncturing the fragile confidence I'd only just rebuilt. Had he noticed something? Impossible. Hudson and the others had handled confidentiality flawlessly, and I'd barely interacted with anyone besides Serafina. Was it just coincidence? Or was he feeling guilty, afraid I'd left something behind, so he decided to sweep everything early? Whatever the reason, the situation had become troublesome. If he inspected the code thoroughly, he might find remnants of my early annotations or logical traces I hadn't completely erased. Legally, it wouldn't be enough to prove anything, but it could alert him, make him suspicious. He's scared. Serafina fumed, pacing back and forth in the living room. It's because you were too calm during the divorce, he's paranoid. That despicable man. Holding the baby in my arms, I forced myself to stay composed. Panic wouldn't solve anything. He took the existing finished code, I murmured, my mind racing. But Hudson still has the concept for the optimized version we proposed before, the one that got rejected. Berlin doesn't know the details of that plan. That meant we still had time, but we had to move faster. I immediately texted Hudson, suspend all private contact. Proceed with resignation as usual. Move all optimization work underground. Use an entirely new architecture. Avoid any traceable connection to the old code. Hudson replied quickly, understood, President Sue. We'll be extremely careful. Setting my phone down, I stared out the window at the gray-heavy sky. It felt like a silent war had already begun. Berlin, you want to investigate? Go ahead, dig as deep as you can. The real weapon is still being forged in our hands. The following days, I spun like a wound up top, never stopping. By day, I was a new mother caring for an infant, feeding, changing diapers, lulling to sleep, over and over again. The baby was obedient, but still consumed most of my energy. Only after midnight, when the baby was sound asleep, did I become President Sue again. The small study became our temporary war room. Serafina, Hudson, now officially resigned, and 3 trusted engineers he brought in, Jed, Tony, and Danny, formed a secret online group. We didn't rent fancy offices. All communication happened through encrypted channels. Hudson and his team worked from home, using their spare time to build the foundational framework of our new product, based on that previously rejected optimized plan. President Sue, Berlin's team has been testing the core code like crazy. Hudson reported during one late-night meeting. They even hired an external security firm to do vulnerability scans. Luckily, we pivoted just in time. They've been combing through the system, but I doubt they'll find anything. Tony chimed in, chuckling, exactly. They're still patching that outdated framework, while our new structure's prototype is almost done. The initial performance test, our numbers blow theirs out of the water. The screen displayed the comparison charts. The line representing our new architecture soared far above Berlin's current product curve. Looking at the graph, I felt a long-lost surge of adrenaline. This was my battlefield, the one I could truly control with intelligence and skill. Excellent work, everyone. I steadied my tone, suppressing the thrill. Keep pushing forward, but above all, stay safe. And Serafina, what's your progress? Her voice came through with a hint of pride. All good. The evidence trail of Berlin's asset transfers is secured, we can trigger legal action anytime. Plus, under the guise of consulting, I've reconnected with several of Vortex Tech's former clients. They're growing frustrated with Berlin's reckless ambition and stagnant product updates. Perfect. Technology, law, and market are 3 fronts we're advancing together. Berlin, while you exhaust yourself guarding in the open, I've already woven a web in the shadows, one that will eventually close around you. But there was still one major problem, funding. Serafina needed time to recover the assets, and my cash flow was painfully tight. Supporting a research team and planning for future operations was stretching every dollar to its limit. I put my small pre-marriage apartment up for sale, officially listing it through an agent. It had been my parents' keepsake for me, but now, it would become the first brick in rebuilding my dream. When Serafina found out, she went silent for a long while. Then, she transferred me a sum of money. "This is all my private savings," she said firmly over the phone. "Consider it my investment. Don't treat me like an outsider, President Sue. I believe in you." My grip tightened around the phone, eyes growing hot. There's no truer friendship than one tested in hardship. "All right," I replied without pretension. "You're officially an investor. Once the new company's registered, you'll get your shares." With her contribution, we could finally rent a small temporary studio and purchase essential development equipment. Hudson's team no longer had to crowd into their homes, and our efficiency improved dramatically. I named the new product Rebirth. The name symbolized more than my personal renewal. It was a phoenix rising from the ashes of our technology and a promise of fresh energy for the market. We handled our daily routines by day, and by night, gathered at the Rebirth studio, often working until dawn. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and the rhythmic tapping of keyboards, forming a symphony of ambition and persistence. I watched Hudson and the engineers argue passionately over technical details, saw Serafina buried in thick legal documents to shield us from risks, and witnessed Rebirth grow, day by day, stronger, more complete, more alive. That sense of fulfillment and control was something I'd never felt before, not even during my 4 invisible years as the so-called co-founder of Vortex. Then, just as Rebirth entered its critical phase, trouble erupted, on Berlin's side, of course. The news came from Hudson. Although he'd formally resigned from Vortex, he still had friends there. "President Sue," he reported with barely concealed excitement, "Engineer Lou, the one heading the Venus Project's core module, just quit. And not just him, the whole team resigned together yesterday." I paused, taken aback. What happened? Apparently, Berlin forced the team to rush the new version before Amanda returned to the country. He cut the testing cycle short, and a huge bug slipped through, almost wiped customer data. Berlin blamed Lou publicly, even humiliated him in front of everyone. Lou got furious and led his whole group out. I fell silent for a moment. Lou had been a veteran at Vortex, solid skills, straightforward personality. Berlin's move was as good as cutting off his own arm. Berlin must be losing his mind right now. Jed chuckled. "Losing core engineers and falling behind schedule, let's see how he explains that to his precious white moonlight." Serafina scoffed. "Serves him right. That's what you get for betraying your team. He only ever cared about his so-called love, never the people who built the company with him." But I wasn't as optimistic as they were. The more desperate Berlin became, the more unpredictable and dangerous he'd get. "This is our chance," I said calmly, cutting through their chatter. "Hudson, reach out to Engineer Lou privately. See where he stands. If he's open, Rebirth will welcome him, but utmost secrecy." Hudson immediately nodded. "Understood. I'll handle it." Days passed in a blur of tension and exhaustion. My baby was growing fast, features sharpening, and sometimes, when he smiled at me with that toothless grin, it melted every ounce of fatigue I carried. Then, one quiet dawn, our long nights of labor finally bore fruit. The first Rebirth demo, our prototype, was complete. When we finally managed to run the entire process successfully, watching the smooth interface and the astonishing data processing speed unfold on screen, the tiny studio erupted in restrained cheers. Hudson's face flushed with excitement. "President Sue. We did it. This performance, it'll crush every competing product on the market." Jed, Tony, and Danny high-fived each other, elated. Even though Serafina didn't understand the technical details, she could read our faces, and smiled brighter than anyone. I stared at the screen, at that glowing Rebirth logo, and a storm of emotions welled up inside me. From being mercilessly cast aside, to quietly plotting my counterattack, to now, finally seeing tangible results, every step had been hard, but each one had been solid. Then my phone lit up with a local news notification. The headline was bold and impossible to miss. Vortex Tech CEO Berlin announces lavish welcome banquet for renowned overseas designer Miss Amanda this Sunday evening. Sources say the two share a close relationship. The lively atmosphere in the studio froze instantly. Everyone turned toward me. Expressionless, I skimmed the headline. It was accompanied by a glossy photo of Berlin and Amanda standing side by side, him handsome, her graceful. They looked perfect together. He was losing engineers, his project was hanging by a thread, and yet he still had time, and audacity, to throw a grand banquet for his white moonlight. I locked my phone and raised my head. My teammates watched me, concern and curiosity flickering in their eyes. Then, slowly, the corner of my mouth curved upward, a cold, unwavering smile. "A banquet?" I said softly, my gaze sharp as a blade. "Perfect." Chapter 05. Perfect? Serafina leaned in, eyes sparkling. "Helen, what are you planning? Don't tell me you're going to crash the banquet." Hudson and the others looked tense, worried I might act impulsively. I smiled faintly, turning my gaze back to the rebirth interface still running smoothly on the computer screen. My tone was calm, unshaken. "Crash the banquet? That's too crude. What I intended wasn't a public outburst, it was a declaration of sovereignty. Sovereignty over what I had built in the past, and sovereignty over the market that would belong to me in the future. Berlin wanted to use that dinner to show the world his triumphant reunion with his so-called dream heroine. Then I would attend and show him, and every potential client and partner, who truly held the power to create value and shape the future. "Serafina," I said, turning to her, "get me an invitation to that banquet." "No problem." She agreed instantly, then hesitated, her concern evident. "But Helen, your health." "I'm fine," I interrupted. The postpartum recovery had gone well. My stamina might not have been fully restored, but it was more than enough for one evening. I needed armor, not the shiniest one, but the kind that radiated quiet confidence. From the back of my wardrobe, I took out a black-fitted evening gown. I'd worn it at last year's company gala, simple yet elegant, with a flawless cut that outlined my figure while maintaining poise. Fortunately, my body had recovered well enough to still fit into it. Then I visited the beauty salon, treated myself to a meticulous facial, and applied natural but refined makeup, just enough to erase the traces of sleepless nights and highlight my best features. When I looked in the mirror, the woman gazing back at me had clear, steady eyes and a composed grace. "Helen, you're back." Sunday evening. The city glowed under the soft haze of lights. At the hotel entrance, luxury cars lined the driveway, and the air shimmered with perfume and chatter. Berlin had certainly spared no expense for Amanda. Holding the invitation Serafina had procured, I stepped into the venue with unhurried confidence. My heels clicked crisply against the polished marble floor, each sound like a heartbeat, not of nervousness, but of anticipation. Inside, the ballroom buzzed with laughter and conversation. My eyes quickly found them, Berlin and Amanda, standing at the center of attention. Berlin was dressed in a custom suit, radiating charm as he chatted with the guests. At his side, Amanda clung delicately to his arm, draped in a flowing white lace gown, her smile demure and polished. A picture-perfect couple. For a brief second, something stung in my chest, but it faded, replaced by calm clarity. I didn't approach immediately. Instead, I picked up a glass of champagne and positioned myself in a quieter corner, observing. I spotted several key clients, Mr. Wong, Mr. Ning, longtime collaborators of Vortex. Then Berlin noticed me. His smile froze. His expression flickered with shock and unmistakable unease. He hadn't expected to see me here. Amanda followed his gaze, and when her eyes landed on me, her own smile faltered slightly. She tightened her grip on his arm. I raised my glass toward them with a flawlessly polite smile, graceful, untouchable. Berlin's face darkened. He muttered something to the people beside him, then strode over. "Helen," he said in a low voice, his tone sharp with irritation, "what are you doing here?" I swirled the champagne in my glass, bubbles rising like sparks. "What's wrong, Mr. Berlin? Your ex-wife can't stop by to offer congratulations? You're not welcome here," he snapped. Manda is the guest of honor tonight. I won't allow any unpleasant scenes. Unpleasant? I arched a brow, feigning innocence. I came to give my blessings. You're being overly sensitive, Mr. Berlin. My gaze slipped past him, landing on Amanda. Miss Lynn, it's been a while. Welcome home. Amanda managed a weak smile. Thank you, Miss Sue. Berlin stepped forward, blocking my view, his voice laced with warning. Helen Sue, what are you trying to do? We're done. Completely. Done? I repeated softly, tasting the word as if it were a fine wine. If Mr. Berlin says we're done, then we're done. Just then, I spotted my target, Mr. Wong, one of our key potential clients, passing by. Without hesitation, I raised my voice just enough to carry. Mr. Wong. He turned, momentarily surprised, then broke into a warm smile. Ah. President Sue. It's been ages. I heard you were recuperating at home for a while. Feeling better now? Thank you for your concern, Mr. Wong. I'm fully recovered. I smiled, clinking my glass with his, completely ignoring Berlin's dark, stony expression beside me. That's great, wonderful. Mr. Wong said enthusiastically. You have no idea, after you took your break, several Vortex projects slowed to a crawl. We were all getting anxious. Berlin's face tightened even more. He quickly interjected, Mr. Wong, you're exaggerating. The company's operations are running smoothly. Mr. Wong chuckled politely, but didn't bother replying to him. Instead, he turned back to me. President Sue, what's next for you? Got any new ventures in mind? Don't forget your old friends if you have a good project. That was exactly what I'd been waiting for. I smiled lightly, my tone relaxed but filled with confidence. Actually, I'm preparing a new project, called Rebirth. It focuses on intelligent data processing and deeply optimized user interaction. The first demo is already complete. The performance data looks quite promising, around a 30 to 50% improvement over existing products in the market. 30 to 50%? Mr. Wong's eyes widened, leaning closer in genuine excitement. President Sue, that's incredible. You have to show me sometime, I'd love to see it in action. Of course, I replied modestly. Once the project's a bit more refined, you'll be the first I invite for feedback. Our voices weren't loud, but they were just loud enough for the curious ears nearby to catch key phrases. Helen, new project, performance improvement of 30 to 50%. I could feel the subtle shift in the air, the glances that turned toward me, filled with curiosity, interest, and unmistakable business calculation. Berlin stood beside us, utterly sidelined. His jaw was tight, his eyes dark with suppressed fury. Amanda tugged gently at his sleeve, trying to coax him away, but he stayed rooted to the spot. A few more acquaintances approached, offering greetings similar to Mr. Wong's, surprised to see me, concerned about my recovery, and intrigued by the Rebirth project. I handled every conversation with ease and poise, laughing, exchanging ideas, while Berlin's stiff discomfort hung beside me like a shadow. I knew, then and there, that I had achieved exactly what I came for. On the stage where they thought they owned the spotlight, I had quietly dropped a bomb, one that would echo far beyond this glittering night. As the banquet drew to a close, I decided it was time to make my exit. But Berlin, of course, couldn't let it go. He cornered me in the hallway leading toward the restrooms, where the music from the ballroom faded into a distant hum. Helen, he nearly spat my name through gritted teeth. You did this on purpose. You came here just to stir things up, just to brag about that so-called new project. I stopped and turned, meeting his glare with calm indifference. Mr. Berlin, your team sent the invitations. I simply attended, quite properly, I might add. As for my project, Mr. Wong asked, and I answered truthfully. Is that a problem? Or is it that only you are allowed to have dreams, while I'm forbidden to have a career of my own? Career? Berlin sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. With what? You've got a baby, Helen. You think charming a few clients and waving around some big promises makes you a competitor? Don't kid yourself. His words were sharp, deliberately cruel, meant to cut deep. But I was no longer the woman who would crumble under his voice. Whether it works or not, I said evenly, we'll find out soon enough. Maybe you should worry less about me and more about Vortex. I heard your core engineers walked out. Is the project timeline still holding up? Wouldn't want to delay Miss Lynn's dream now, would we? Each sentence hit its mark, and I saw his face tighten muscle by muscle until fury was all that remained. Berlin stepped forward, closing the distance until I could smell his cologne, sharp, suffocating. Helen, he said, his voice low and dangerous, I'm warning you, don't play with fire. I looked straight into his eyes, my tone as clear as steel. Berlin, let me remind you, ever since the day you handed me those divorce papers, you lost the right to warn me about anything. Then I turned, brushing past him without another glance. My heels echoed down the corridor, crisp, steady, defiant. When I stepped outside, the night air was cool against my skin, the faint chill sharpening my thoughts. My phone buzzed. A message from Serafina, how did it go? Smoothly. I was just about to reply when another message popped up, from Hudson. President Sue, urgent update. After the banquet, Berlin contacted multiple investors and even a few competitors. He's asking around about your rebirth project. Also, he might have used some connections to start investigating our studio's address and registration details. My stomach tightened. So fast. And already resorting to such underhanded tactics. Chapter 06. Hudson's message hit me like a block of ice dropped straight into my chest. Berlin was panicking, and like a cornered animal, he was starting to lash out. He was no longer content with fair competition, he was moving into dirty territory. I immediately typed a reply to Hudson, everyone stay away from the studio for now. Encrypt all cloud backups. Move all physical devices. From this point forward, online contact only. Thank you for your hard work. We had to cut off every thread he could possibly grab hold of. Almost instantly, Serafina's call came through, her voice tight with worry. Helen. Are you okay? That bastard Berlin, did he come after you? I'm fine, I said, recounting briefly what had happened at the banquet and Berlin's reaction. But yes, he started digging into us. He dares? That's invasion of privacy. I'm going to gather evidence and sue him. Don't rush, I said firmly, keeping my voice steady. Right now, he's only investigating and asking questions. He hasn't crossed a legal line yet. We'll prepare for the worst, but no need to confront him head-on. Not yet. When I hung up, I sat for a while, staring out the car window at the glittering night outside. The city lights blurred like rippling water, but inside, I felt nothing but cold clarity. Berlin, you really have become that desperate. When I got home, the baby was already asleep, gently breathing in his crib under the care of the temporary nanny. I tiptoed over, watching his peaceful little face, and a wave of fierce protectiveness washed over me. For him, I wouldn't fall. The next few days passed in uneasy calm. Hudson's team worked quickly, relocating key equipment and backups to several secure locations. The old studio was left as an empty shell, containing only trivial clutter. All our communication moved to encrypted channels. Rebirth's progress slowed slightly, but with the core architecture complete, the remaining tasks were mainly optimization and testing. Remote work was less efficient, but it kept us safe. That afternoon, I was sitting on the balcony with the baby in my arms, soaking up the soft sunlight, when the doorbell rang, sharp, urgent, insistent. My heart gave a small jolt. Something didn't feel right. Peering through the peephole, I froze. Berlin. Standing right outside, his face clouded with anger, and beside him, a man in a tailored suit holding a briefcase. A lawyer. So, the storm had arrived. I took a deep breath, gently laid the baby back in his crib, closed the bedroom door, straightened my clothes, and finally opened the door. Mr. Berlin, I said coolly, standing firm in the doorway. What brings you here? His sharp gaze swept over me, then flicked toward the interior. Not going to invite me in? It's inconvenient, I replied flatly. The baby's asleep. Let's talk here. He snorted, clearly annoyed, but didn't insist. Instead, he took a folder from the lawyer beside him and thrust it toward me. Helen, I expect an explanation. I took the folder and skimmed through it. Inside were printed email screenshots and comparison charts. Our rebirth prototype diagrams matched against Vortex's existing system. Several sections were highlighted in red with bold annotations suggesting similarities. The conclusion accused Rebirth of potential intellectual property infringement. An explanation? I asked lightly, closing the folder. And what exactly would you like me to explain, Mr. Berlin? Explain, he snapped, voice rising, how you managed to create a project so suspiciously similar to Vortex's core technology in such a short time. Helen, I can't believe you'd stoop to this. I gave you a generous settlement in the divorce, wasn't that enough? You had to go and steal from my company. Your company? I repeated, the words tasting bitterly ironic on my tongue. Have you forgotten who built Vortex's original framework? How much of that so-called proprietary technology came from me? I'm not stealing, Berlin, I'm reclaiming what was mine to begin with. I'm innovating on my own foundation. That's not theft. Don't twist the facts, he barked. You signed a confidentiality agreement and a non-compete. You're breaking the law, Helen. I can sue you for this. The lawyer behind him finally spoke up, his tone mechanical, professional, like he was reading from a prepared script. Miss Sue, according to the agreement, you are prohibited from engaging in any business that directly competes with Vortex Technologies within 1 year of your departure. Your rebirth project overlaps significantly with Vortex's core operations. This constitutes a potential breach of your non-compete clause. Mr. Berlin is entitled to demand that you cease the project immediately and compensate for any resulting losses. Listening to their rehearsed lines, I felt an icy stillness settle in my chest. So this was his move. Using a clause he'd kept in his pocket, waiting for the right moment to strike. Non-compete clause? I tilted my head slightly, my gaze cutting straight into Berlin. Mr. Berlin, have you forgotten something? When I left the company, it was you who forced me out. And unless my memory fails me, you also neglected to fulfill your part of that very same contract. You never paid the agreed non-compete compensation, did you? For the first time, his composure faltered. Serafina had long since gone over that contract, even verified my bank statements. Berlin hadn't paid me a single cent. And without payment, that clause was legally weak at best, virtually unenforceable. The lawyer clearly knew it too. His voice hesitated before continuing, softer now. The compensation issue can be addressed later, but your current project still poses a potential threat to Vortex's. Potential threat? I cut him off sharply, my eyes locking onto Berlin's with open derision. Mr. Berlin, you seem to be confused about what threatens Vortex. It's not me. It's not Rebirth. I took a deliberate step closer, my voice calm but razor-sharp. It's you, your arrogance, your stubbornness that drove away your best engineers. It's your greed for quick success that's rotting the company from within. It's your obsession with your so-called white moonlight that made you blind to everything else. Shut up. Berlin snapped, his face flushing red, veins tightening along his temple. You're talking nonsense. I didn't back down. Am I? Then tell me, why did Engineer Liu leave with his entire team? Why is the Venus project collapsing under a pile of bugs? Are those because I stole your secrets too? He froze, his jaw tightening. For a moment, there was nothing but the faint hum of tension between us. I looked at him, this furious, cornered man, and felt no triumph, only an aching exhaustion. This was the man I had once loved, once fought beside. And now he was standing at my door, waving false accusations like a weapon. Berlin, I said quietly, my tone returning to a measured calm. If you came here today just to threaten me with this flimsy report and an invalid contract, then congratulations. You've shown me exactly how desperate you've become. I held up the folder, then pressed it back into his hand. Now, if you'll excuse me, please see yourself out. He stared at me, fury warring with something else in his eyes, something bitter, conflicted, almost human. But it was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared. Finally, he inhaled sharply, as if steeling himself. His voice dropped to a cold whisper, laced with menace. Helen, don't push me. If I expose your private communications with Hudson, if I reveal that you stole Vortex's core technology, do you really think anyone in this industry will work with you again? Who would ever trust a woman accused of stealing from her ex-husband's company? My heart dropped like a stone. He knew about Hudson. He dug deeper than I ever imagined. Berlin caught the flicker of shock on my face and straightened, regaining the upper hand. His tone turned colder, more commanding. For the sake of our history, he said, I'm giving you one last chance. Shut down the Rebirth project. Sign this statement promising you'll never touch this field again. Otherwise. He paused, eyes narrowing, voice cutting like ice. I won't just sue you. I'll destroy you. I'll make sure you're ruined, and that no one in this industry will ever dare to work with you again. He held my gaze for a long moment, then turned sharply on his heel, motioning for the lawyer to follow. Their footsteps echoed down the corridor until only silence remained. I stood there, alone. The cold crept up my spine, spreading through my limbs like frost. He knew about Hudson. What else did he know? What could he twist, distort, or expose? If he went public with those accusations, it wouldn't matter whether I was innocent or not. In this world, perception could destroy faster than truth could repair. A newborn company couldn't survive a scandal like that. I leaned against the door, breathing slowly, my hands trembling despite myself. And then, my phone rang. It was Serafina. Helen, her voice came through, low but firm, with a dangerous edge of excitement. Berlin went to see you, didn't he? Don't panic. If he wants to sue, we'll fight back. In fact, I just got hold of something, real proof of his asset transfers and tax evasion. Hard evidence. If he wants war, we'll give him one. Her words hit me like a surge of electricity, steadying my pulse, burning through the ice in my veins. I tightened my grip on the phone. So this was how he wanted to play it. Berlin, did you really think you could scare me into submission? You forgot, the firewall password for your company's mainframe is still our wedding anniversary. Whatever you can find, I can go deeper. Chapter 07. Berlin's threat hung over us like a storm cloud. He knew about Hudson, meaning he might already have partial evidence of our private contact. If he truly decided to drag everything into the public eye, the damage would be irreversible. Even if we won in court, Rebirth, still fragile and unborn, could be strangled by gossip before it ever had a chance to breathe. Serafina's evidence of Berlin's tax evasion was powerful, but it was a scorched earth weapon. Once used, both sides would bleed. We can't let him control the story, I told the team during our emergency online meeting. Before he spreads that accusation, we'll dismantle it ourselves. Hudson frowned. President Sue, but we did use that optimization concept from the original rejected proposal. Won't that cause trouble? The idea is abstract, I said firmly. The code isn't. Every single line is newly written, every structure original. Not a single piece copied from Vortex. That's our strongest defense. Then I turned to Serafina. Prepare the materials. If he wants to sue, we'll meet him head-on, and countersue for defamation and false accusation. Serafina's eyes gleamed. Perfect. Let's drag this fight into daylight and make him explain himself under oath. Let's see who's really afraid of exposure. Once we made the decision to go on the offensive, the tension transformed into focus and resolve. We mobilized quickly, gathering every trace of proof that Rebirth was independently developed, recorded online meetings, carefully redacted, commit histories, time-stamped version logs, even the original design sketches from my university thesis that had inspired the project's earliest concept. It didn't take long before the next blow landed. A few days later, both Serafina and I received formal court summonses. Berlin had officially filed a lawsuit, accusing me of violating a non-compete agreement and infringing upon proprietary technical assets. The story leaked fast. Within days, the industry was buzzing. A divorced couple suing each other in a high-tech intellectual property case, it was the perfect storm of scandal. Speculation spread like wildfire. Some of our potential partners who had shown interest in Rebirth began to hesitate, adopting the cautious silence of those who feared choosing the wrong side. The pressure was suffocating. On the day of the hearing, I wore a crisp tailored suit and pulled my hair into a tight, deliberate bun. The woman in the mirror looked sharp, composed, unyielding. Serafina, calm and razor-focused, walked beside me into the courthouse. At the entrance, we crossed paths with Berlin and his legal team. His eyes searched mine, looking for some trace of panic. He found none. I passed him without a word, as though he were nothing more than another name in the docket. The trial began. Berlin's lawyers struck first, painting me as a cunning woman who had used her marriage to access confidential data, then turned around and weaponized it after the divorce. They displayed carefully curated documents suggesting overlaps between Vortex and Rebirth, hoping to shape the image of a thief draped in ambition. When it was our turn, Serafina stood up, steady, unhurried, her voice carrying the crisp edge of precision. She started by dismantling their foundation, pointing out that the non-compete agreement Berlin relied upon was legally invalid due to his failure to pay compensation. Then, without missing a beat, she produced the bank records, hard proof. Berlin's lawyers shifted uncomfortably. And for the first time since this battle began, the tide began, just slightly, to turn. Then Serafina moved to the core accusation, the so-called technical secrets. "Your Honor," she began, her voice ringing clear across the courtroom. "The claim that my client stole Vortex's proprietary technology is utterly baseless. In fact, the so-called core framework of Vortex technologies originated from none other than my client herself, Ms. Helen Sue. She submitted a weathered sketchbook into evidence, my old design notebook from senior year. Inside were early drafts of the system architecture, long predating Vortex's founding. A certified forensic report confirmed the timestamps and authorship beyond dispute. And as for the Rebirth project, Serafina continued smoothly. Its architecture and algorithms are entirely original. We've obtained a full third-party expert report comparing the two code bases. The conclusion is clear, the implementations are completely different, with zero evidence of duplication. She raised the thick binder of documents for all to see. As for the conceptual resemblance, she said, glancing at Berlin with a sharp half-smile, my client merely refined and expanded on her own ideas. Since when does improving one's own work count as theft? Berlin's lawyer tried to interject, but every argument crumbled against the solid wall of evidence and logic Serafina had built. The courtroom's rhythm shifted entirely in our favor. And then, just as Berlin's team was scrambling to recover, Serafina struck again. "Your Honor," she said evenly. "We are filing a countersuit for defamation and malicious accusation. Furthermore, we have reason to believe that Mr. Berlin's lawsuit was a deliberate attempt to obscure his own serious financial misconduct." The room stirred as she placed new documents before the judge, evidence of Berlin's asset transfers during his marriage, along with backup fragments of internal financial records showing deliberate irregularities. The source, that USB drive we had recovered. Though technically peripheral to the case, the timing and substance of the revelation sent a jolt through the courtroom. The judge's expression darkened. Berlin's lawyers bent together, whispering frantically. Berlin himself went pale, disbelief etched across his face. He had never imagined that the very secrets he thought buried, the ones he'd hidden inside his own company, would surface here in open court. These documents were obtained illegally, his lawyer stammered, voice cracking. But Serafina was ready. These records were accessed lawfully while my client was still employed at Vortex and pertained to her former duties. Their authenticity can be independently verified at the court's discretion. The judge nodded gravely and called for a recess, announcing that the verdict would be delivered at a later date. But everyone in that room already knew who had won. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the sunlight was blinding, brilliant, almost unreal. Berlin caught up to me outside, moving quickly, blocking my path. His face was drained of color, the arrogance gone, replaced by a hollow disbelief. "Those records?" he rasped, his voice dry and brittle. How could you have them?" I stopped walking and met his gaze steadily. "You forgot," I said quietly. "The company firewall password is still our wedding anniversary." His pupils constricted, the color drained from his face. In that instant, he understood, the very date he had long erased from his memory, the day that once meant us, had become the key to his downfall. Helen. His voice was hoarse, almost pleading. Did you really have to go this far? Far? I echoed the word with a soft laugh, one that tasted bitter and cold. Berlin, from the moment you handed me the divorce papers in the maternity ward, from the moment you tried to destroy me and rebirth with false accusations, you lost the right to use that word. I didn't wait for him to answer. Turning away, I walked toward Serafina's car waiting at the curb. Behind me, I heard hurried footsteps and a panicked voice, Berlin's lawyer. Mr. Berlin, bad news. Miss Lynn, she just booked the earliest flight out of the country after hearing about the trial. I didn't look back. Inside the car, Serafina threw a triumphant punch into the air. We did it, Helen, we won. Let's see how Berlin struts now. I leaned back against the seat, exhaling slowly. This war was over, at least this battle. Justice, at last, had spoken for us. My phone buzzed. A message from Hudson. President Sue, we heard the verdict. Fantastic news. A few of the investors who were hesitating just reached out, they want to meet again. Outside, the city lights blurred past the window, bright streaks cutting through the dusk. For the first time in months, I felt a clear, steady certainty. The era of Helen Sue, the era of rebirth, was just beginning. Then, as the car paused at a red light, my gaze drifted out the window, and my heart skipped. On the street corner, half hidden under the shadow of a street lamp, stood a thin man in a dark jacket and a baseball cap. His eyes, cold, sharp, obsessive, were fixed directly on our car. My breath caught for a moment. Was that Berlin? Chapter 08. The man in the baseball cap quickly vanished around the corner, so fast that I wondered if I had imagined it, a hallucination born of nerves and exhaustion. What's wrong, Helen? Serafina noticed something off about me. Nothing, I shook my head, pushing down that flicker of unease. Maybe I just saw it wrong. There were more important things at hand. The victory in court was like a starting gun, the rebirth project had officially gone from underground to the public eye. Investors who once hesitated were now reaching out, and client inquiries were flooding in. My team and I barely had time to breathe. We registered the company, leased a larger office, recruited new staff. Every day felt like a battle, but one filled with hope. During that time, bits and pieces of news about Berlin reached me through different channels. After losing the case, he not only had to cover the legal costs, but the trial had also exposed his company's tax and accounting irregularities, triggering investigations from government authorities. Vortex Technologies' stock price plummeted, panic spread among the staff, and several remaining executives resigned. A company once at the height of glory was now on the brink of collapse. But faster than the fall of his career was the collapse of his so-called love. That evening, as I was working late reviewing renovation plans for the new office, my phone screen lit up with a message from a friend who still had business ties with Berlin. Helen, I have to tell you something. Just keep it to yourself, okay? Berlin seems to have lost his mind. My heart skipped a beat. I replied, what happened? His company's a mess, right? Word is, this afternoon he went to Amanda's apartment, probably begging her to use her family's connections to help him. But they ended up arguing right there at the door. It got so loud that building security had to step in. I stared at the screen, picturing the scene. My heart felt nothing, if anything, I almost wanted to laugh. Of course he went to Amanda. In his eyes, she would always be that goddess who could save him. And then, I asked. Then? Amanda slammed the door on him. She told him through the door not to come looking for her again. Said that being with him meant no future, and that he should have some self-awareness and stop dragging her down. The words were cold and brutally realistic, like a bucket of ice water dousing any foolish hope. My friend sighed at the end. I remember how he treated you for Amanda. Thought it was some epic love story. Guess it wasn't much after all. I typed back, thanks for letting me know, and put the phone down. True love? I doubted Berlin even knew what that meant. What he clung to wasn't Amanda herself, but the obsession of wanting what he couldn't have, and the access she symbolized. Now that he'd lost his value, that so-called love shattered like a soap bubble. A few evenings later, I finished work early and decided to stop by the mall nearby to buy some new clothes for the baby. Just as I stepped out of a children's clothing store, I spotted a familiar figure sitting at an outdoor cafe on the first floor, Berlin. He was alone, a cup of coffee untouched in front of him. His shirt was wrinkled, a faint stubble shadowed his jaw, and his empty eyes stared across the street at the flashing neon lights. The air around him reeked of defeat, nothing like the once arrogant, ambitious CEO he used to be. I intended to walk away unnoticed, but he suddenly turned his head, as if sensing me, and his gaze locked onto mine with uncanny precision. At first, confusion flickered in his eyes, then recognition, followed by a rush of tangled emotions, shame, resentment, unwillingness, and something else I couldn't quite name, maybe a plea. He stood up, staggered slightly, and walked toward me. I didn't move. I just stood there quietly, watching him approach. The air smelled faintly of bitter coffee, mingled with the stale scent of smoke and alcohol that clung to him. "Helen." His voice was hoarse, almost broken. "President Berlin, do you need something?" My tone was calm and distant. The title made the muscles in his face twitch. He forced out a smile uglier than a sob. "Calling me President Berlin now? Do we really have to be like this?" "Otherwise," I asked, my eyes steady. "What other relationship do we still have?" He was choked by my words and fell silent for a moment. After taking several deep breaths, as if gathering courage, he finally spoke. "Helen, I was wrong." I raised an eyebrow and said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I shouldn't have treated you that way, back at the postpartum care center. I shouldn't have listened to Amanda, and I never should have forced you out of the company like that." His words tumbled out in fragments as he tried to reach for my arm. I took a step back, avoiding his touch. His hand froze in midair, and embarrassment flashed across his face. "Amanda, she's gone," he muttered, head bowed, his voice trembling. "She never loved me. She just... Now I have nothing left. The company's finished, and she's gone too. Helen, I know you hate me, but for the child's sake, could you give me another chance?" As he spoke, tears actually fell down his face. He looked like a lost child with nowhere to go. If this had been the past, I might have softened at such a sight. But now, all I felt was a cold, absurd detachment. "A chance?" I repeated quietly, looking at his tear-streaked face. "Berlin, have you forgotten how you swore in court that you'd destroy me?" I was out of my mind, I was desperate, he protested, his tone frantic. "It was all Amanda. She kept saying awful things about you, she provoked me." "Enough." I cut him off, my voice low but sharp as ice. "Berlin, even now, you're still blaming others. It was your own greed that blinded you. You're the one who chose betrayal and cruelty. Amanda was never the reason you fell, you were." His sobbing stopped instantly. The color drained from his face. "As for the child," I said slowly, meeting his eyes, each word clear and steady. "His father died the moment he chose another woman over the mother who had just given birth to him." With that, I no longer looked at his stricken face. I turned and walked away. A few steps later, I could still hear his muffled animal-like sobs echoing behind me. Outside the mall, the evening breeze carried a chill that swept away the last trace of emotion he had ever stirred in me. I pulled out my phone. A message from Serafina popped up. The lease for the new office had been finalized and would be ready to sign tomorrow. Hudson had also updated me on the team expansion progress. Everything was moving forward, toward the light. Just as I was about to hail a cab home, my phone rang again. A local number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello." There was silence for 2 seconds, and then a soft, delicate voice came through, one I had almost forgotten yet instantly recognized. It was Amanda. So she hadn't left? Or had she come back? "Miss Sue," her voice flowed through the line, calm and poised, carrying that familiar hint of practiced fragility. "Would you have a moment to talk?" Chapter 09. Amanda's call caught me off guard. There had never been any real contact between us, no shared past worth mentioning. For her to reach out to me at this point, her motive was obvious, either for Berlin's sake or for her own. "Do we really have anything to talk about?" I asked, my tone flat and distant. There was a brief silence on the other end. When Amanda finally spoke, her voice was as soft as ever, but beneath that gentleness was a faint, almost imperceptible strain. "It's about Berlin. Miss Sue, I know he's in a terrible state right now. We've known each other for years, and I don't want to see him completely ruined. Maybe we could meet and talk. See if there's still some room for redemption." Redemption? I almost laughed. Was she trying to save Berlin, or to save her own reputation now that his downfall threatened to drag her down as well? "That won't be necessary," I said coldly. "His situation has nothing to do with me. If you're concerned, Miss Lynn, you should speak to him directly." Without waiting for her reply, I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Her reappearance was like a pebble dropped into a lake, a brief ripple, quickly fading, leaving the surface calm again. Neither Berlin nor Amanda could stir any emotion in me now. They were the past. My future was rebirth, and my baby. But I had underestimated how far a desperate man accustomed to blaming everyone but himself could go. A few days later, the afternoon sun was bright and warm. I was taking my baby for a walk in the neighborhood park. The little one gurgled happily in the stroller, waving his tiny hands at everything around him with pure curiosity. It was one of the few peaceful moments in my day. My phone buzzed, a call from a kindergarten principal. I frowned in confusion, my baby was still too young for school. "Hello, is this Miss Sue?" The principal's voice was anxious. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but a man just came to our gate. He looked very agitated, said he was a family member of yours and wanted to see the child. Our security stopped him, but he got emotional. We were worried something might happen." My heart clenched. A wave of cold shot from my feet to my scalp. A man, acting unstable, asking to see my child. Berlin? How did he even know about this kindergarten? I'd only ever walked past it a few times, never registered or shared any information. Was he following me? "What does he look like?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm, though it trembled at the edges. The description matched Berlin perfectly. "Thank you. My child isn't there, he's with me right now. Please, do not let that man into the school grounds. I'm calling the police immediately." I hung up, dialed the police, and reported everything clearly, my location, his behavior, the possible threat. Then I gripped the stroller and turned to head toward a more crowded area. But it was already too late. Berlin appeared out of nowhere, blocking my path. He looked even worse than he had at the mall, his eyes bloodshot, hair unkempt, clothes wrinkled and dirty. The stench of alcohol hung heavy on him. His gaze was wild, unhinged, like a beast cornered and ready to strike. "Helen." His voice rasped, and his eyes darted past me to the stroller. "My son, give me my son." He stumbled forward, reaching for the stroller. "Berlin. What are you doing?" I shouted, stepping in front of the stroller, shielding it with my body as my heart pounded furiously. A few passers-by stopped to watch, alarmed, but none dared to intervene. "He's my blood. Why won't you let me see him?" Berlin roared, trying to shove me aside. "It's all your fault. You vicious woman. You ruined my company. You drove Amanda away. I have nothing left. He's all I have. Give him back to me." His strength was terrifying, wild and unrestrained, fueled by drunken madness. He shoved me so hard that I stumbled, almost falling, yet I clung desperately to the stroller with both hands. The baby, startled, burst into frightened wails. That sound, sharp and trembling, sliced through my heart like a blade, igniting every ounce of fury and resolve within me. "Berlin." I straightened, no longer retreating. My eyes turned cold as steel, my voice firm and cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Stop. Right. Now." Maybe it was the look in my eyes, or the force of my words, whatever it was, he froze for a moment, his movement faltering. "Look at yourself." My tone was ice cold, each word deliberate and merciless. "Drunk. Filthy. Stalking me. Harassing me. A man who can't even control himself, what right do you have to talk about being a father? I'm not worthless, he roared, eyes bloodshot, as if I had stabbed him where it hurt most. You ruined me. Shut up. I cut him off, stepping forward, my voice sharp and unwavering. I ruined you? Stop lying to yourself, Berlin. You were destroyed by your own greed, selfishness, and stupidity. You neglected your company for Amanda. You abandoned your wife because of jealousy and vanity. You took everything you had, and threw it away with your own hands. You did this to yourself. My voice wasn't loud, but it struck him like thunder. Each word landed heavy, leaving no room for escape. Berlin froze, stunned into silence. The fury and madness drained from his face, leaving only pallor and emptiness. You think taking the child will prove you're not a complete failure? That you still own something? I sneered. Let me tell you, you don't deserve it. The moment you abandoned your wife and newborn for Amanda, you lost the right to call yourself his father, forever. I pointed at the stroller, where my baby was still crying uncontrollably. Look at him. He's terrified, because of you. Is this what you call love? Berlin's gaze followed my hand. He stared at the tiny face, so much like his own, streaked with tears. His body seemed to deflate all at once. He staggered back 2 steps, then slumped onto the edge of a flower bed, burying his face in his hands as a strangled, hopeless sob escaped his throat. In the distance, the wail of sirens grew louder. I no longer looked at him, the man who had finally collapsed under the weight of his own ruin. I bent over the stroller, checking the baby with trembling hands. Thankfully, he was unharmed, just frightened. I gently patted his back, whispering soft comforts until his sobs quieted. Moments later, the police arrived. After hearing the situation, they took Berlin away. He didn't look at me, or at the child. He just walked numbly, hollow, like a body whose soul had already left. Holding my baby close, I watched the patrol car disappear down the road. My body finally loosened, the adrenaline fading, leaving a sheen of cold sweat down my back. Soon after, Serafina and Hudson rushed over, their faces pale with worry, voices overlapping in a flurry of concern. It's fine, I murmured, hugging my child tightly, his small warmth anchoring me. It's over. The words were for them, but also for myself. That encounter ended everything. Whatever remained between Berlin and me, affection, resentment, or unfinished hate, was gone. He was no longer a threat, no longer a part of my life. Back in the apartment, I lulled my baby to sleep. Watching his peaceful little face, I felt an unfamiliar calm, quiet, solid, unshakable. My phone screen lit up, a message from the Rebirth Project team. Tomorrow morning, I would meet with a powerful investment firm for the final round of negotiations. Their proposal looked promising. I replied, "Got it. I'll be there on time." Setting the phone down, I walked to the window and gazed out at the glittering city lights. The shadows Berlin left behind had finally faded. Ahead lay an open horizon, one I would conquer with Rebirth and my son. No court battles, no public gossip, not even the madness of a broken ex-husband could stop me now. Just then, from the bedroom came a soft whimper from the baby. I turned to check on him, but before I could take a step, my phone buzzed again on the table. The name flashing on the screen made me pause. Amanda. What did she want this time? Chapter 10. Amanda's name flashed insistently on the screen. I could almost picture her expression, that familiar gentleness masking anxiety and calculation. With Berlin completely fallen, she must have panicked, afraid that the evidence I once held might implicate her, or perhaps she simply wanted to confirm what I knew. I didn't answer. The ringtone echoed through the quiet living room until it stopped on its own. Then, calmly, I picked up my phone and blocked her number again. This time, it would be the last. She and I had always walked 2 parallel paths, intersecting only because of Berlin, a ridiculous coincidence built on deceit and vanity. Now that the bridge between us had crumbled, there was no reason for our lines to ever meet again. Turning into the bedroom, I found my baby shifting slightly in his sleep, lips puckering before he settled again. I tucked the blanket around him and smiled softly. The world outside could rage with storms, none of it would breach the peace of this small, sacred space that belonged only to us. 1 year later. The Rebirth Technologies press conference. Backstage, I stood before the mirror. The reflection looking back at me was one I hadn't seen before, composed, confident, reborn. The white suit set off my skin and posture perfectly, my hair was neatly pinned up, revealing a smooth forehead and clear, steady eyes. In them, there was calm forged by hardship, and the sharpness of someone who had built something from the ground up. Serafina fussed with my collar, eyes glistening. "Our Helen, you look incredible. Better than ever." Hudson, Jed, and the rest of the team stood nearby in immaculate suits, nervous but glowing with anticipation. This year had been a relentless sprint, sleepless nights, countless reworks, endless negotiations. We had poured everything we had into Rebirth, our sweat, tears, and dreams, and now the day had come. "Ready, President Sue?" Hudson asked, his voice trembling with excitement. I drew a deep breath and nodded. "Let's go." The stage lights flared to life, gathering on me as I stepped out. The auditorium was packed, industry leaders, investors, reporters. Familiar faces dotted the front rows. Among them, I noticed Mr. Wong, whom I had once met briefly at one of Berlin's lavish banquets. He caught my eye and smiled, nodding with genuine respect. I took my place at the podium, adjusted the microphone, and let my gaze sweep calmly across the room. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Helen Sue, founder and CEO of Rebirth Technologies." My speech wasn't filled with fancy language or empty promises. Instead, I spoke with precision and conviction, presenting data, logic, and results, showing how Rebirth's platform, with its groundbreaking performance and forward-thinking architecture, had solved long-standing industry pain points and ushered in a true revolution in efficiency. Applause rippled through the audience again and again. When the big screen displayed a performance comparison between Rebirth and other mainstream competitors, one name conspicuously missing but clearly understood by everyone, the excitement reached its peak. "We believe that the purpose of technology," I said, my voice resonant and steady, "is to create a better future, not to cling to empty dreams and never to serve as anyone's puppet." The hall fell silent for a moment, the kind of silence that signals genuine attention. Then I paused, letting my gaze soften, looking past the crowd as if through time itself. In the past year, I've been asked many times whether I felt wronged, whether I thought life was unfair. My voice was quiet but unwavering. I want to say this: every step, in light or shadow, is a gift. Every setback is a teacher. They made me see myself more clearly, and they taught me something important, that a woman's first duty is to please herself. Your worth should never be defined by anyone else, and your dreams must be forged by your own hands. I lifted my head, a confident, radiant smile blooming on my face. So I named the company Rebirth. It doesn't just symbolize a technological renaissance, it represents the power within each of us to leave the past behind and begin a new, stronger chapter of life that truly belongs to ourselves. To embrace yourself, that is how you become the queen of your own world. Thank you, everyone. As my final words echoed through the hall, thunderous applause erupted. I looked out over the audience, the faces alight with inspiration, the shining eyes of my teammates filled with pride and joy, and for the first time, a deep sense of fulfillment and calm settled in my heart. The press conference was a resounding success. The signing, the investor meetings, the interviews, everything went smoothly, leaving me barely a moment to breathe. By the time the excitement subsided, I declined the invitation to the celebration dinner and returned alone to my office. Outside the enormous floor-to-ceiling window stretched the glittering city skyline, thousands of lights flickering like stars. A year ago, I had left that cold postpartum care center with my newborn in my arms, my future uncertain. A year later, I stood here, with my own company, my own success, and a new life forged by my own hands. My phone was overflowing with congratulatory messages. I replied to each one, smiling as I opened Serafina's latest text. "Helen, guess who came?" Attached was a photo, Serafina with a poised, sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, both smiling brightly at the camera. That woman was the head of one of the top investment firms in the country, the very one who had decided that day to invest a massive sum into Rebirth. I remembered what she had said to me privately, that she wasn't just investing in the technology, she was investing in me. Looking at the photo, I couldn't help but smile. Just then, a gentle knock sounded on the office door. "Come in." It was my new assistant, a young, energetic girl fresh out of college. She was holding a large bouquet of vibrant sunflowers, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "President Sue, your flowers. And there's a card too." I took the bouquet, the scent of life and sunlight washing over me. Opening the card, I found just one line written in bold, steady handwriting. "An outstanding speech. I look forward to working with you. Oscar." Oscar, the son of that same investment firm's director. Young, capable, and sharp-minded, he held a key role in the company. We'd exchanged a few words at the press conference, just enough to leave a good impression on both sides. I slipped the card back into the bouquet and smiled at my assistant. "Thank you. They're beautiful." After she left, I held the sunflowers close and walked back to the window. The night breeze drifted in, cool and gentle. The past, all the love, the hatred, the pain, had settled into silence. Berlin had reportedly left the city, vanished without a trace. Amanda had disappeared from my life completely. The wounds they left had long since faded, leaving nothing behind, not even bitterness. My future was mine to shape. The warmth of my child, the trust of my partners, the blueprint of a growing company, and the boundless lights beyond the glass, all of it filled me with strength and peace. To embrace oneself is to reign. I was no longer someone's wife, no longer anyone's appendage. I was simply Helen. A mother. An entrepreneur. A woman who had finally learned to love herself, and in doing so, had gained the whole world. In the reflection on the window, I saw my own clear silhouette, poised, serene, with a confident smile curving my lips. The road ahead was long. But I knew now, the light was already beneath my feet.